In this video we are going to study a very interesting game, in which black uses the pterodactyl, developing his king's bishop on the g7 square, attacking in the center with c5 and developing his queen to the a5 square, to increase maximum pressure against the d4 point. White started the game with knight f3, the ready opening. White develops his king's knight towards a good square and remains flexible for the moment. Black responded with c5, advancing with a side pawn and taking control over the d4 square. White played c4, transposing towards the symmetrical variation of the English opening. Black played g6, with the idea of developing his king's bishop to the g7 square, where it will be very well placed, since it will occupy the large diagonal of dark squares and put pressure on the center. White played d4, placing a pawn in the center. Bishop g7, developing the king's bishop and increasing the pressure against the d4 pawn. If now white captures the black pawn, black can play knight a6 and he is going to recover the pawn by capturing it with his knight on c5, which will bring the knight closer to the center. Surely, a Maroczy-type position will be reached in which black will have very good chances. In the game after bishop g7 white played e4, occupying the center with his pawns. This same position can be reached from an order of moves more typical of modern defense. Black played d6. If white now captures the pawn on c5, black can respond with queen a5 check with the idea of capturing on c5 and recovering the pawn. A Maroczy-type position will be reached in which black would have very good chances, due to his strong bishop on g7, which has the large diagonal of dark squares open and would remain very active. White played knight c3, developing his queen's knight. Black played queen a5, activating the queen and pinning the white knight. This formation chosen by black is called the pterodactyl, in contrast to the dragon system of the Sicilian defense, and consists of making the moves g6, bishop g7, c5 and queen a5, thus black exerts a lot of pressure against the d4 point. Black's idea is to continue with knight c6, bishop g4 and increase the pressure against the d4 pawn. If white now captures on c5, black will be able to recapture with the queen and a Maroczy-type formation would be reached. In the game white played d5, relieving tension in the center and gaining space. Black played bishop takes c3 check, giving up his powerful fianchettoed bishop, with the idea of creating weaknesses in the opponent's pawn structure. It is not good to capture the c3 pawn, since white keeps the bishop pair and, despite having a pawn less, white has the advantage. In the game black played knight f6, accelerating their development and threatening to capture the e4 pawn. If white defends the pawn with the queen, black can capture the pawn with knight takes e4, since it is not possible to capture the knight because black plays queen takes c3 check and wins. In the game white played knight d2, to defend the pawn on e4. Black captured the c3 pawn, winning a pawn, threatening to capture the a1 rook and pinning the white knight, so that black also threatens to capture on e4. Rook b1, to defend the rook. Knight takes e4, eliminating white's central pawn and capturing another pawn. If white now plays rook b3, attacking the queen, black answers queen d4. And after knight takes e4, queen takes e4 check, rook e3, black plays queen g4 with the idea of exchanging queens. Black has two extra pawns and if he manages to complete his development he could assert his material advantage. In the game white played bishop b2 creating a double attack along the large diagonal of dark squares. Black responded queen takes d2 check. And after queen takes d2. Knight takes d2, and the white rook is attacked. If white now captures the knight, black responds with f6, blocking the action to the white bishop, to defend the rook. Black has 2 extra pawns and has a clear advantage. In the game, white captured the rook on h8. Black captured the b1 rook. And black has 1 piece and 2 extra pawns and has a clear advantage. If white tries to trap the opponent's knight with bishop to b2, black plays bishop f5. After f3, with the idea of continuing with g4, black plays knight a6, completing the development of his minor pieces. After g4, bishop c2. White can try h4, with the idea of continuing with rook h2 and attacking the enemy bishop. But after knight b4, a3, knight d3 check, bishop takes d3, bishop takes d3, black has managed to save his extra piece and is threatening to capture on c4 and has a clear advantage. In the game, white played bishop d3, attacking the opposing knight. Now, black could have played knight a3 since after bishop b2, black can play knight takes c4, and after bishop takes c4, black has 3 extra pawns and his advantage is clear. In the game, black played f6, to lock in the bishop on h8. White captured the opponent's knight. King f7. The bishop on h8 has been trapped and black is going to capture it and be left with a piece advantage. King d2. Bishop f5, developing the bishop, with the idea of changing pieces and simplifying the position. Bishop takes f5. G takes f5. Rook e1. Knight d7 and white resigned. White can try to save his bishop with bishop to g7, since it is not possible to capture the bishop with the king since white continues with rook takes e7 check and he can capture the knight and is left with an advantage. However, black can play rook g8, attacking the enemy bishop. And after bishop h6, rook takes g2. King e2, black plays rook g4. Black will be able to capture the c4 pawn and win easily. In summary, the pterodactyl formation is a very interesting game scheme, which allows black to exert a lot of pressure against the d4 point and offers him possibilities to weaken the opponent's pawn structure and gain an advantage.